We have our friend Stephen Miller with us. He is the founder of America First Legal, a former senior advisor in the Trump White House, and a very astute and wise fellow. Mr. Miller, good to have you back.
Thank you. Appreciate the introduction.
So we have some big stuff going on at the border, or continuously happening at the border, as in it's the most wide open that it has ever been, the most lawless. It's a massive problem if you look at the polling for Biden and the Democrats going into 2024. And former President Trump has put out some pretty big ideas, and I know you've been amplifying them for what he would do in his second term. Can you take us through some of those? Because I'm seeing talk of widespread deportations, for example, and a very serious escalation in that. How would that work? Can we get it done?
Yes, we can, and here's exactly how it would work. So the way that interior enforcement works right now, well, under Biden, it's not even happening at all. But the way it works historically is you have targeted enforcement actions focusing on specific high-priority individuals. So you work up specific packages against specific people, and then you case them, and you follow them around, and you carry out the arrest. You would need to, which would involve a massive increase in personnel involving the National Guard, involving DEA, ATF, FBI, state, local, and sheriffs as well, too. You would need to switch to indiscriminate or large-scale enforcement activities involving basically going into any place where there's known congregations of illegals and holding everybody on site, determining who's there illegally, and then taking people who are there illegally into federal detention. But the key part here to understand, and of course you would still continue to do all of the targeted enforcement as well. It would be an and, not an or. The key part, though, to actually being able to effectuate the removals is to have large-scale detention facilities to carry out the removals, because this isn't like when Eisenhower did it in the 1950s, when it was a strictly bilateral problem. Two countries were involved, the United States and Mexico. That was it. So logistically, it's pretty simple, right? Where's everybody going? They're going to Mexico. Now, if you were to do a hypothetical raid at, say, a food processing facility, you might get illegal aliens from 24 different countries. And each one of those illegal aliens has a different complicated fact pattern in terms of, do they have a U.S. citizen spouse? Do they have a U.S. citizen child? Do they have some pending asylum applications, so on and so forth? And so you need to be able to then take all these individuals into an interior staging facility to be able to then line up, get the deportation order, and then line up the flight out of the country. So to achieve efficiency at scale, the way this would work is you try to co-locate everybody in massive facilities, probably near your existing border infrastructure. So you would go to where you have your Border Patrol facilities, and this way you'd be able to say, okay, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday are our flights back to the Northern Triangle. Every Tuesday and Thursday are our flights to South America. Every Saturday and Sunday are our flights to Africa, right? Once a week we do a flight to India. Once a week we do a flight to China, so on and so forth. And that way, as you're getting people who've been here for different lengths of time and different factual circumstances and everything else, when their case ends, whether it be in an hour or a week, when it ends, there'll be a plane ready and fueled up and ready to go and take them home. The only other detail I'll add to this, and I could obviously talk about it for an hour, but is that President Trump has also said that he would invoke a statute that's been on the books since the John Adams administration, which allows you to deport any alien aged 14 or older without due process if there's a declared state of incursion, a predatory incursion or invasion from that country. So this is an extremely powerful tool that waives due process, whether it's a state of invasion or a state of a, quote, predatory incursion. And obviously under Biden, there's now multiple countries with invasions and predatory incursions into the United States. And so that would be an additional authority that you'd be able to use to expedite these removals.
Stephen, you know the border better than I would bet almost anybody in the country in terms of how to handle the situation there. You obviously be very highly involved in any Trump administration 2024. obviously the polls out there look incredible right now for Trump. He's up in basically every single national poll I've seen. We've all discussed in great detail how well he's doing in swing states. We consistently, however, get emails from people out there who say it doesn't matter. The Democrats are going to rig the system again. How confident are you? Again, you're plugged in as well as anybody, that the voting systems are going to be cleaner and more reliable in 2024 than they were in 2020? Or are you confident in that? I would say, I bet Buck would agree, one of the number one questions we get about the 2024 election. Is it going to be safer and more secure by far than 2020? What's happened to change that? How would you assess and answer that question?
Well, there's obviously some red states that have implemented important election reforms, and that's something that we should all celebrate. But it's still the Wild West, as we know, in so many blue states like Nevada, for example. But number one, this is going to be a forever problem, right? So people need to internalize the fact that as long as there are radical leftists in this country, they are going to try to sabotage the machinery of our elections in any state they can control. And even if you fix things, you fix things in Pennsylvania, right? Well, eventually they'll take control again in Pennsylvania, and they'll destroy it all over again. And so you have to do two things, and these are two things that President Trump is absolutely committed to doing. Number one is you have to build a world-class ballot harvesting operation to try to, and this is an expression we've known for many years, right? You have to try to beat the cheat. You have to overcome the margin of fraud that you're going to anticipate. And then the second thing that you have to do is obviously put together a world-class legal team so that when the time comes for election challenges, that you're in there hard, you're in there early, you're in there aggressively. But the reality is that, again, this is going to be a permanent, forever problem. And so there's no way of pretending that you could choose some other course or choose some other tack, and you're not going to have to deal with this. The reality is that it's going to keep happening, it's going to continue happening, and the answer for the Republican Party is everywhere you can fix the election laws, you fix them. And everywhere you can't, again, like Nevada, where it really is the Wild West, and there's no way to fix them in Nevada because of the composition of the legislature and the governor's office, then you just have to fight fire with fire. And you have to drop box, and you have to ballot harvest, and you have to do all of that, and with such a sophistication and degree of financing that, again, that you beat the cheat. And the reality is that President Trump is the best positioned candidate by orders of magnitude to be able to bring out the millions with an M, the millions of voters that are the gold mine in ballot harvesting. And those are voters that are known as low propensity, high affinity. In other words, voters that are very unlikely to vote, but totally love you. That is how you win elections with ballot harvesting, is before Election Day collecting millions and millions of ballots from the voters who love you, but almost never vote. That's the key right there.
We're speaking to Stephen Miller of America First Legal. And Stephen, I want to give you this opportunity to wish President Biden a happy birthday. He's 81 today. and a little bit more seriously, if you would just tell us, where do you come down on all this? Because you've got all this chatter from a lot of Democrats about how there has to be a plan B. And I just sit here and I keep asking, okay, well, what would the plan B be?
Well, they don't have it. There's no safe landing spot for them. And any notion there's an easy way to force Biden out and then force Kamala Harris out and then nominate some other Democrat, the days are ticking by. The months are ticking by. There's no clean removal operation available to anything or anybody at this point in time. So they are screwed no matter how you look at it. And we all hear about this Gavin Newsom fantasy, which, again, involves convincing Joe Biden to give up the one thing that he's coveted for his entire adult life above anything and everything else, and then to convince Kamala Harris to become, I mean, maybe there's some other historical precedent, but I can't think of it, at least the first vice president in memory just to completely bow out because she's loathed and hated by voters, and then to install Gavin Newsom, who would have to run defending the California record at a time in which those issues are front and center in America's minds in terms of crime, in terms of education, in terms of the cost of living. I mean, it would just be a calamity for Democrats because everybody intuitively understands that California has gone to hell, that Los Angeles has gone to hell, and so on. And so I think that they're just trapped. They have a candidate whose mind is slipping away by the day, who can barely even function, and there is no way at all. They have only two poison chalices to choose from: Biden or the most complicated candidate replacement operation in history, and both are completely, at this point, calamitous for Democrats.
Stephen Miller with us right now. Stephen, where do you stand on picking people up at the airport?
In terms of if a
Or
friend
do you think we've had a big debate about this? It's a holiday season. Let me set the tables for you. It's a holiday season. Going to be one of the biggest.
For a second, I thought you were asking me how I feel about picking illegal aliens up at the airport. And I was like, I'm strongly opposed to that.
I love that. That's
strongly discourage that.
So Buck and I are of the opinion that holiday travel, it is a disaster to try to drive to an airport to pick someone up, right? Like coming in for the holiday or whatever. Get an Uber, get a Lyft, manage to not have to add in.
No able-bodied person should be asking anyone to pick them up at the airport as a general matter. So number one, as a person, you should never be known as the person who picks up people at the airport. I haven't picked up anybody but my immediate nuclear family at the airport basically in my entire life. Like, unless you're my wife or my children, I'm not picking you up at the airport. The only exception to that I've ever made, which I would advise any intelligent man to make, would be for my in-laws. But that would be it. But you don't want to be known as a mark that's going around just to pick people up at the airport, let alone at the holidays. There's 100 different ways to get a drive from the airport home at this point in time. So I'm strongly opposed to it. But again, there's reasonable exceptions in the interest of welfare in the home. And obviously, if your in-laws need a ride to the airport, you're just going to have to suck it up and do it.
I knew that you would have a totally logical analysis here because much of what you do is completely logical from a political perspective. You're on the right team here. Like this whole idea of driving people to the airport and picking people up it's really just become an infestation in its own way.
Like 1979, why is anybody in the year 2023 asking anybody to help them get to and from the airport like this is a novel experiment, like we don't know how to get to and from the airport on our own? I mean, I suppose if you lived in like deep out in the country and there was just no possible way, that's different. But if you're living in or around or near any kind of major city, you need to be getting yourself to and from the airport. And there's something wrong with you if you're putting that kind of pressure on your friends. If you're saying, like, hey, I'm coming in on Christmas Eve, if you could please drop everything you're doing and drive an hour through traffic to pick me up at the airport and then wait in line for 45 minutes and then get told by people in yellow and orange vests every 5 minutes that you need to move or you're going to get towed, you're going to get ticketed. Who's asking anybody to do that?
It's so well said. Happy Thanksgiving to you. We'll talk to you again soon, Stephen.
Happy Thanksgiving. God bless.